Hi, welcome. I'm Melody Joy, and I have set myself a goal this week of finishing this king size quilt. Ignore the dust clouds. As soon as I brought this batting out and started shaking it around, just dust everywhere. And I had just vacuumed, swept, and mopped and rolled up my rug so that I would have room to lay this out. I need to get this basted so that I can get it quilted and then add the binding. It's going to be a lot of work because it is an oversized king size quilt. So it's even larger than a standard king because my friend that I'm making it for specifically wanted it to be able to hang down the side of her bed. Now, I had given her a few different options on things we could use for the back of this quilt, and including 108-inch wide fabric or possibly a large sheet. And so she ordered these beautiful sheets. This is a king size sheet. It's from a Target brand. It's 100% cotton. It is super soft. And the only problem is it is just slightly too small. But I had some pieces left from the front of the quilt, and these pieces are all 5-inch pieces. The fabric that she wanted was only available in fat quarters. So the pattern is called Charming One, and the pattern is by Sharon Holland, and you're actually supposed to use charm packs, but the fabric that she wanted to use was only available in fat quarters. So I cut them into 5-inch squares. And when I did that, I had some pieces left over that were approximately 5-inch by 2-inch, 5-inch by 4-inch. And I just pieced all of those remnants together from the front and basically made kind of like a piano key border. And I'm going to add that onto this sheet to give myself the extra width that I need to be able to use it as the backing for this giant quilt. Just for size reference on this quilt, it's making my full-size couches look like little love seats, and it also it's laying on top of a batting that is supposed to be 120 inches square, 120 inches by 120 inches, and it pretty much covers almost the whole batting. So next I need to prep this sheet to be able to add the piano key border. And the top of the part of the sheet, it's multiple layers folded on itself. I thought about trying to use my seam ripper, but it's folded and sewn so many times. I don't think it's a very good idea to try to seam rip it. So I'm just using my rotary cutter and my long ruler to go ahead and trim off. I don't know what you would call that on a sheet, but it's the part of the sheet that would go at the top of your bed, and it's multiple layers folded and sewn down. So I'm just going to cut all of that off because I think it would be way too bulky to try to leave it in, and it's be way too difficult to try to unpick it with a seam ripper. And if you're getting a little worried about how wrinkly this sheet looks, don't worry. I give it a good ironing and steam press before I add the borders. Now, I did decide on the bottom hem, it was only folded over one time and it just had one single stitch, and there wasn't much back stitching, that I was going to go ahead and seam rip that because I figured out if I undid the bottom hem, it was going to give me about an extra 2 inches of fabric. And at this point, every inch matters. When I'm working on something like this that's just kind of mindless and a little bit tedious and just kind of repetitive, I'll just put on a movie that I've watched about 1,000 times that I can picture exactly what's happening on screen, and I just listen to the music and the dialogue. And I'm sure I could also do an audiobook, but my comfort level when I'm doing a project like this is just to put on a movie I've seen 1,000 times. In this case, today, the movie of choice was Ever After, and so I just listened and picked. Okay, after ironing everything and making sure it was nice and flat, I went ahead and I started attaching this pieced border to the back. Normally you put borders on the front of a quilt, but in this case, I'm adding a border to the back to make it big enough. And what I did when I pieced it was I just kept piecing all of those strips together, and then I ironed them with all the seam allowances going the same way. So when I'm attaching it, I'm going in the same direction of the seam allowances so that everything will lay nice and flat. I'm also using a walking foot right now. That is just to help make sure that it doesn't get a lot of puckers in it. I think you would also be fine to use your presser foot here, but I know for other parts of this quilt, like especially when I add the binding, it's sometimes easier to use a walking foot. It's just kind of an even feed foot. So I kind of tend to use it almost for everything now. I mean, I do use my presser foot too, but the walking foot has been a game changer in how my projects turn out. So I added this pieced border to the top and bottom of my sheet and trimmed it up, and then I added the long strips to each side and trimmed it again. I ironed it towards the pieced border. So I ironed the seam allowance away from the sheet. Once I was done adding all of these pieced borders, the next step was to get out some blue painter's tape. I took this whole thing back into my living room and went ahead and taped it pretty side down. So I taped it to my living room floor with the pretty side of the sheet facing the floor. Then I added the batting and I taped that down really well. And then I added my actual quilt top. I did add a little 505 spray glue. And again, when I got this batting laid out, it just made cotton dust everywhere. So if you see those little flurries, it's from the batting. And I actually had my air purifier running the whole time too, because when I'm working with this spray glue and with a lot of things that create, you know, this fiber dust, I run the air purifier in the room that I'm in just to try to help prevent me from inhaling more of these things for lung health, but you can see the dust in the air. But anyway, I'm spraying a little bit of this glue. I'm down on my hands and knees. This is definitely a physical job. But I'm unrolling it a little, spraying a little, unrolling a little, and then using my hands to smooth it out. Once I'm done with this part up with the glue, I went back over with safety pins and I pinned. I know some people pin a lot. Since I'd already used the glue as well, I really put safety pins mostly around the borders and the edges, and then kind of sprinkled throughout the middle of the quilt, maybe every 8 to 10 inches. I wasn't necessarily super precise with the safety pins, but just trying to make sure that my quilt sandwich was going to stay together. Okay, it's finally almost time to start actually quilting because I have pieced my backing, I have made my quilt sandwich, and so now we're actually gonna get to quilt this beautiful quilt. So I have my little gardening gloves from Ross that give me a little bit of grip. I have my machine set up with a free motion foot, and I am using an ivory or cream colored thread. And I have my feed dogs down, my stitch length to 0. And the main thing is just maneuvering the weight of this so that it's not creating too much drag. And then I'm doing a meander with some loops thrown in. And I did not finish it today, but like I said, my goal is to finish this king size quilt by the end of this week. So hopefully by the end of this week, I am posting a quilt drop of the whole thing completed. But just the work to get the backing fabric done, the quilt top basted, and to be able to even start the free motion quilting, that was about 6 hours of work today. So I'm pretty proud of myself. I'm sure there's other people who are faster at this whole quilting process. This is the first king size quilt I've made. I've made a bunch of baby, twin size, throw size, but this is the first king size quilt I have tackled. And I think about it like if you're a runner and you usually run a 5K, which is 3 miles, and someone says, oh, hey, you're a runner. Do you want to train for a marathon with me? And you're like, okay, sure. And then you're like, oh my gosh, this is so much worse than a 5K because it's so long. That's what I keep thinking about this king size quilt. It's like, yes, I like quilting. I love quilting. But a king size project is just so much longer. Every step of it is longer than with a throw size. So let me know what size quilt you prefer to work on. Do you prefer to work on baby size quilts or throw size quilts? Do you do a lot of king size quilts? If you've made a king size quilt, would you make one again? I will say the fabrics that my friend chose for this quilt are gorgeous. Most of them are art gallery fabrics. I think there's one from another line called Under the Canopy. And I know the art gallery fabrics were called Listen to Your Heart by, I think it's by Sharon Holland. I think it's by the same designer who it's the quilt pattern. And it is a quilt that is set on point, and the fabrics are super soft and beautiful colors. So I just don't know if I'll do another project this big anytime soon. I'm definitely going to go do some throw size projects after this one. But yeah, let me know which size quilt you prefer to work on. And I have a striped binding that is going to get added later on. And let me just give you a little peek at what the back is looking like. So here you can see what the back looks like. There's like the piece on the right side, the piano key border, and then the ivory with the little rosebuds. That was actually the sheet that she had picked up from Target. And so I think the pieced border added some interest to the back. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this glimpse into my sewing room, and happy quilting.